the Tabsint repository on GitLab. And the schema is nested in here. So if you navigate to the www and then res, protocol, and then schema, this is everything that defines the protocol schema. There is a direct link to here from the Tabsint documentation from the protocols help section. So if we open that protocol schema.json file, and I'm going to open an example here, so we can look at an example at the same time. So with my example over here, you see that there's a protocol ID called sample. It has a title, a subtitle, help text, and then an array of pages. And if you look over here at the protocol schema.json file, it says that it is defined as a JSON schema. It is an object, so it needs to be, the protocol needs to be enclosed in curly brackets. It is required that there is an array of pages defined. And then all of the other properties that are available to you are protocol ID. You can set a result file name, public key if you want to encrypt the results. And then there's the title and subtitle that we've defined in our example over here.
I just want to jump in with a quick comment. It can be a little confusing that the schema is also JSON formatted. So the protocol itself is formatted with JSON on the right there, so it's curly brackets with the key values. But the schema is also defined using JSON. And if you go to the top of the schema here, you can see the JSON schema specification that we're adhering to. So the way we wrote the schema is defined by the JSON schema organization so that we can validate what you see on the right according to the left. And so it's a little confusing. The schema doesn't look quite exactly like the protocol itself, but once you get used to reading how the schema is formatted, it makes sense how you'd validate with, manually.
Okay. So up here in the protocol schema.json file, you see that it says required is pages. And one of these properties that it defines, if you scroll down, you see pages. And it tells you that pages can be an array of pages or nested protocols that are presented in order unless otherwise set. So a page can be a page or a reference or another protocol. So to see what can be included on a page, we need to go back up, and this slash means that it's in reference to the top level schema folder. So we need to go into definitions and then look at page.json. So go to schema, definitions, page.json. It tells you that a page is going to be a type object. So it's the entire page definition needs to be enclosed in curly brackets. The description tells you that this schema defines a page within a protocol. The required parameter is ID. So every page that you define needs to have an ID set. And the ID is expecting a value that's a string. Also on a page, you could set all of these other parameters that are here. In our example, we've set, the ID, a title, question mean text, and all these other text options. So these are all listed over here: title, subtitle, question mean text. And I'll point out that the key that you use over here in your protocol file must match exactly the way the parameter is defined in the schema file. Tabsint's looking for an exact match. And one other item that this page also has is an image, which is also defined in this page.json file. One of the options is an image, which is also an object. So everything defining the image needs to be enclosed in curly brackets as well. It is required that you give the path as a string what that defines the location of the image that you're going to show. And then an optional parameter is this width parameter that I have defined, and that lets you control the size of the image on the screen. So that's just a quick example of how to use the schema to define what is on a page. Also available to you on a page in the schema shows that you can use any one of these individual response areas. So this is all of the different types of response areas that are available to you to use in Tabsint, both of the with the Creari headset and not with the headset options. And then to find the specifics for each of these exams, you would go into the response areas and then the JSON file for each individual response area. The first protocol I'm going to try to load comes back and tells me that the protocol did not load properly. Please validate your protocol before trying to load again. So this tells me that it's a JSON error. It's not a Tabsint error. If I look at the code that defines that protocol over here, I'm missing a curly bracket, a square bracket, or a comma. Since this is a short protocol, it's fairly easy for me to see where the problem is right now. However, the longer these files, the longer and more complicated they get, the harder it is to spot right away. So the online Tabsint or online JSON validator resources can be very helpful. So you can copy your entire code. The one that I like to use is called JSONlint. It's jasonlint.com. If you paste your code here in this window and select validate JSON, it'll highlight and tell you exactly where the error is. So it tells me here on line 26, it was expecting one of these items, end of file, comma, curly bracket, any one of these, and instead it got a string. So I see now that I was missing a comma here. If I add that and just double check, it validates. So I've found that my problem is right before I define my subprotocols array. And if I add that in, my file is now valid JSON. And you'll notice that in the text editor that I'm using, I use Sublime Text. It actually will highlight syntax errors. So without that comma, you notice that the colon after subprotocols is highlighted, indicating that there is an error there. And then when I add the comma, it's now valid. So the text editor that you use can be a big help in keeping track of those errors. All right, so that was a JSON validation error. And now if we were to look at a Tabsint validation error, I'm going to try to load this protocol. And it comes back and gives a whole bunch of information. So Tabsint is, the protocols are, they're nested objects within objects. The protocol is defined, and then within that, the page is defined, and within that, a response area is defined. And so because of that, the errors can get a little out of hand. So if you scroll down through the bulk of this and look for the error that has the longest key. And so it tells me here that on page 1, within the response area, this parameter called vertical spacing, it's found an invalid type. So it received a string when it expected an integer. So I am going to open, this is my protocol file over here. And if I look on page 1, which Tabson starts at 0. So if I look in my page array, this first page is page 0, and then here is page 1, and within that the response area, and then the key vertical spacing. So I have it defined as a string, but Tabson tells me it's expected an integer. So I'm going to edit this file and get rid of the quotes. So now vertical spacing is an integer. So I've committed the change to GitLab. I'm going to come back to my tablet and update so I can pull the latest version from GitLab and get the change that we just made. It tells me it successfully updated the version. And now if I try to load it again, it comes back with a different Tabson error. So again, this is all repeated error. And I get down to here, and so this tells me that on page 2, and then within that page 0, the response area input type for all, there's no match for numbers. Okay, so in my protocol file, I want to find page 2. So this was page 0, page 1, page 2 starts here. And since it's a nested protocol, within that, I need page 0. So this is page 0 within our nested protocol. And within its response area, input type for all. Okay, so it tells me I have input type for all set as numbers. And it tells me there's no match for numbers. So I want to look at the schema for the multiple input response area and find the valid options for this input type for all parameter. So if I go back to my schema and go to response areas, multiple input. So if I go to the multiple input response area, this is the input type for all parameter that I'm trying to use. And this shows me that my options are text, number, or drop down. So I'd had it set as numbers, but that's number is the valid option. So I'm going to edit my protocol file, correct that. Number is the correct option, and commit the change. All right, so now if I go back to my tablet, pull that update that we just made, and load the protocol, it tells me it successfully loaded the protocol. So that means we fixed all of our validation errors.